The Path to Modernity, a misguided shortcut. The story of the modern world is largely the story of Western domination. From the caravels of Portugal and Spain to the British East India Company, one civilization imposed its will, institutions, languages, and self-image upon the rest of humanity. The brutality was immense. The Spanish conquest killed tens of millions in the Americas. The Portuguese ruled the Indian Ocean through terror, and the East India Company dismantled Indian textile manufacturing to serve British factories. Colonialism conquered not only territories, but minds, restructuring economies, histories, and education. Yet the same West also produced the Enlightenment, science, abolition, and human rights, often from the same families and institutions. John Stuart Mill, Apostle of Liberty, spent 35 years administering the East India Company. When colonial rule ebbed, newly independent nations inherited the machinery of their subjugation. Westminster-style parliaments, European legal codes, extractive bureaucracies, and educational systems that privileged the colonizers' language. Anti-colonial leaders were themselves shaped by the colonizers' categories. Nehru wrote The Discovery of India in English, filtered through Cambridge historiography. Jinnah argued for Pakistan in British constitutional language before British-trained judges. The Second World War shattered the old imperial order, but the ideas planted did not die. The United States inherited the mantle of Western civilization, the Marshall Plan, Bretton Woods, NATO, and the soft power of American culture. For decades, however, Western culture remained the preserve of a small, Western-educated elite. Ordinary people in Lahore, Lucknow, or Lagos lived within their own cultural universes. That changed not through an army, but through a satellite. The Satellite Revolution. In the early 1990s, AsiaSat and Star TV began beaming Western programming across South Asia. State-run broadcasters like Pakistan Television and Doordarshan, with their limited hours and moral constraints, were bypassed overnight. A family in Karachi could watch the same program as a family in New York. The reference point for normality ceased to be the neighbour or the elder. It became the screen. The MTV generation was born. Rock bands sprouted in Pakistan. Cable television exploded in India. But the crucial point is this: the satellite also carried BBC, CNN, Discovery, and National Geographic, the intellectual architecture of Western civilization. Those channels were ignored. The subcontinent did not want Western science, philosophy, law, or institutional discipline. It wanted the shallowest, most marketable residue of Western culture: car chases, soap operas, fashion, and pop music. It wanted the costume without the character. The unthinkable becomes normative. Within a decade of MTV's arrival, Valentine's Day, unknown to the subcontinent's Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, and Buddhists, became a major commercial event from Karachi to Calcutta. Despite the region's own rich traditions of love, Ghalib, Faiz, Holi, Basant, Sufi poetry, Pakistani businesses introduced Black Friday sales, then clumsily rebranded them Blessed Friday when they remembered Friday's sacred status. The pivot is a miniature parable of post-colonial modernity. Imported desire switched on before cultural software could be updated. The speed of adoption reveals a shallow psychology. The West is seen as modern and prosperous because of its culture, so adopting that culture is believed to bring modernity. Halloween, New Year's Eve, and endless Western fashions were adopted without reflection. The internet then accelerated this into a deluge. Algorithms fed appetites, not intellect. The greatest library in human history was used mainly for music videos, celebrity gossip, and pornography. Modernity became a costume. The sartorial revolution and the poverty of substance women abandoned the shalwar kameez, dupatta and sari for jeans and Western tops. Television anchors were dressed in Western clothing as a condition of professionalism. Men abandoned the shalwar kameez for the suit, sweating through Karachi summers in a garment evolved for Northern Europe. Dress is a language. The swap was not liberation, but an exchange of cultural signifiers. What was lost was an aesthetic vocabulary refined over centuries. Yet, despite all the outward paraphernalia, the trousers, the condom advertisements, the rock concerts, the Valentine's cards, true professional and intellectual excellence remains elusive. Pakistani channels cannot compete with Al Jazeera or even Iran's press TV in rigour or depth. Iranian cinema, which often eschews vulgarity entirely, wins Palme d'Or awards and Oscars. Asghar Farhadi's A Separation deals with universal moral complexity through the specific texture of Iranian life, without a single concession to Western commercial sensibilities. Pakistani films and television, full of borrowed idioms, fail internationally because an imitation can never compete with the original on its own terms. Modernity is not dress or frankness about sex. It is intellectual rigour, aesthetic discipline, institutional patience, and the courage to tell meaningful stories rooted in one's own soil. The subcontinent took a shortcut. It mistook the packaging for the product. The roots of the malady westernization cannot be understood apart from the failure of traditional institutions to deliver material success. Colonialism ruptured indigenous education and installed Macaulay's curriculum, designed to produce Indians, English in taste, in opinions, in morals, and in intellect. The postcolonial state perpetuated this, but the deeper question remains. If national character and institutional failure, corruption, nepotism, feudalism, sectarianism are the real obstacles, then rejecting tradition and embracing the ugliest sides of Western culture will not produce a renaissance. It will produce moral decadence, stripped of old restraints without acquiring new ones. Pakistan, founded on a religious and cultural vision, became one of the most enthusiastic consumers of Western culture in the Islamic world because of a vacuum at the centre of national identity. It adopted the worst of the West: consumerism, vulgarity, instant gratification, celebrity worship, while ignoring the best: scientific inquiry, legal precedent, work ethic, civic engagement, universities, libraries, and public intellectual debate. We want the iPhone without the research laboratory, the blue jeans without the Bill of Rights. The contrast: East Asia's quiet dignity. Malaysia and Indonesia have modernized without slavish imitation. Malaysia's Look East policy learned from Japan and Korea while maintaining Islamic and Malay cultural identity. The Petronas Towers incorporate Islamic geometry. Astronauts prayed in orbit according to guidelines developed by Islamic scholars. Indonesia, the world's largest Muslim-majority nation, has built democracy and a growing economy while synthesizing batik, gamelan, and indigenous architecture with modernity. These societies do not blame Islam for their problems. They express pride in their heritage while modernizing. The difference is psychological. They are comfortable in their own skin. The Western Mirror. Will this desperate embrace of Western culture bring acceptance? History answers no. Turkey under Ataturk banned the fez, replaced Arabic script with Latin, adopted Western law, and secularized every outward symbol of Ottoman civilization to join Europe. A century later, Turkey remains outside the European Union, with Germany and France calling the EU a Christian club. Japan modernized superbly, yet its 1980s acquisitions of American landmarks provoked panic and racism. China lifted hundreds of millions from poverty and became indispensable globally, yet the West treats its rise as a threat. South Asian migrants in Britain have lived there for generations, contributed to the NHS and the economy, fought in wars, and raised children who know no other home. Yet they remain segregated in Leicester, Birmingham, Bradford, and London. Enoch Powell's rivers of blood sentiment persists in Brexit-era anxieties. The brown-skinned immigrant, however fluent and well-dressed, remains an outsider. Those who ape Western culture are mocked as coconuts. The borrowed garment does not fit. The West respects not imitation, but achievement. The Japanese engineer, the Korean filmmaker, the Chinese physicist, the Nigerian novelist. Kipling was right that East and West differ, but he also wrote that when two strong men stand face to face, there is neither East nor West. The West respects the strong man, not the one kneeling for the master's clothes. The Internet's broadcast yourself ideology collides violently with South Asian honour culture. Social media does not produce a similar harvest of bloodshed in Western or East Asian societies because their social development has absorbed individual self-presentation differently. In Pakistan, honour killings, blackmail and violence triggered by Facebook and TikTok reveal a collision between foreign norms of self-exposure and local structures of collective honour. The traditional order has been dismantled without being replaced. The individual is adrift between two worlds. The multicultural mirage multiculturalism has been declared a failure by Western leaders themselves. Cameron, Merkel, Sarkozy. Muslim communities remain segregated and economically marginalised. Polls consistently show significant portions of Western populations associating Islam with terrorism and incompatibility. Holocaust denial is criminalised across Europe, while Islamophobia is a Tuesday opinion column. The hierarchy of victimhood maps precisely onto the hierarchy of civilizations. The West still defines itself at its deepest level against the Islamic East. No amount of cultural imitation will dissolve a boundary that is civilizational and, in ways polite society refuses to acknowledge, racial. The verdict and the way forward. Most Pakistanis and Indians live in ignorance of this reality. They associate modernity solely with Western culture and stand in awe of it. But no matter how westernized Asians become, they will remain Asian to the Western eye. The Valentine's card, the blue jeans, and the rock concert will not change that. Only power and ideas change it. Only intellectual and creative achievement changes it. And that force cannot be borrowed. It must be built from within. It is time to rethink modernity. If the West is retreating into its shell, banning minarets, restricting the hijab, surveilling Muslim communities, then we must return to our roots. But this is not a retreat into archaic obscurantism. It is a recovery of the intellectual, spiritual, and cultural resources of Islamic and South Asian traditions as living resources. The philosophy of Ibn Sina and Ibn Rushd, the jurisprudence of Islamic scholars, the interiority of Sufism, the depth of Vedanta and Buddhism, the aesthetics of Mughal architecture, the literatures of Urdu, Bengali, and Tamil. We should not be a pale imitation of the West. We should be a unique, confident, self-possessed civilization contributing to the world on its own terms. Learn from the West without surrendering to it. Adopt what is useful without worshipping what is fashionable. Build universities that advance knowledge, research institutions that produce original science, media that inform, legal systems that deliver justice, and an economy that produces rather than merely consumes. This will not be quick or easy. The shortcut is a mirage. The only road is the long one, and it begins at home. The West will not save us, and it will not accept us, no matter how thoroughly we imitate it. It will respect us only when we bring something it cannot produce from its own resources. And we have that something. Civilizations that have grappled with the human condition for thousands of years. What we lack is not resources, but confidence, not heritage, but courage, not capacity, but discipline. the West will not save us. The only genuine path to modernity is to look in the mirror and see not a failed Westerner, but a bearer of a civilization with its own centre of gravity, its own sources of meaning, and its own gifts to offer the world.